Okay, well, we have watched stocks get to record highs recently. And when it comes to the economy, so far, at least when we talk about the U.S., there's some signs of resilience this morning. Canada, just based on how things have gone on the trade front so far, is also faring better than what was previously feared. And yet, given the fact that the markets have rallied to records, are there some considerations out there when it comes to the tariff threat that market participants need to know about? Let's ask Carol Schleif. She's Chief Market Strategist at BMO Private Wealth. Carol, it's nice to have you back with us. And we actually had a guest on earlier today who said, hold on a second, we can't walk away from the tariff story. I mean, that's bound to impact certain businesses. How are you thinking about it as a strategist?
I think one of the things that's really important to remember is that we are seeing it come through in selected places. The broad-based country tariffs are still under legal review, and the hearings in that case happen July 31st. So I think the longer we push out what that actual rate is for a country, the more potential that part has to be overturned. So we're really focused on where are the sectoral tariffs currently hitting, where are they likely to hit, because those are the ones, particularly for individual industries, where you can already see some of the impacts coming through. We saw it a little bit in the PPI, a little bit in the CPI this week, in terms of specific goods where the prices are starting to creep up because some of those pre-bought inventories are being worked down. And so from a macro strategy standpoint, it really does create an environment that's quite amenable, if you will, for active management, because you have to be able to go in there and discern the winners and the losers, even in a particular industry. Because if you've got an industry, say in the U.S., that already does the bulk of its sourcing in the United States, or you've got a particular company, it's going to benefit relative to some of the others. So it's interesting. It also is worth remembering, as we've also seen in the numbers this week, that tariffs are on goods so far, not on services, and the services are forming, and the reductions in some of the price increases in services are forming an offset for some of the increases. So there's a lot of moving parts to analyze and to try to figure out how it ultimately plays out.
So what would be the sectors then that you would be mindful of because of the tariff threat? Just as an example, as you know, here in Canada, the Prime Minister yesterday was sort of rallying behind steel workers because that industry has been caught up in all of this.
Well, and the knock-on impacts that you're already seeing in the United States, because the steel and the aluminum tariffs have already hit appliances, and not all appliances equally, but we've seen price increases in appliances. We saw them during the pandemic, and we saw them the first round of tariffs too. So it's thinking through the downstream tangential. So the steel and aluminum is one, auto industry is one we're watching very carefully, because it's really necessary. I mean, those aren't supply chains that you can or even want to focus in a particular country. We've worked really hard over the last 10, 15, 20 years in North America to integrate those supply chains. And so hopefully some cooler heads prevail as we roll out additional tariffs. But there's pending tariffs on semiconductors. There's pending tariffs. There's these so-called investigations that put these 232 and other tariffs on specific industry goods. Pharma is another one, although there's also been floated the issue that he intends to put the Trump administration intends to put very big tariffs on pharma, but delay them some period of time to give additional time to move things back. And the knock-on impact from a positive standpoint is to the extent that those industries like pharma are expanding production capabilities in the United States, it has knock-on impacts for the ability of those construction manufacturers to be able to play into there. So there's some winners, there's some losers, and there's a lot of sharp pencils and analysis that needs to go on to figure it out.
Well, and I also find this to be a very interesting period because there's been an appetite to explore long-term themes, arguably more so than in the past, and maybe that's because we can see things happening that no doubt are going to have impact. AI is an obvious one, but we already had a guest this morning who was saying all the infrastructure spending for a myriad of reasons that governments have been committing to, and actually part of that is indirectly, sometimes directly tied to the tariff story, that is going to help out other businesses. So I guess I would ask you sort of, are you leaning into a trend like that if you're leaning away from companies that are most impacted by the tariff uncertainty?
We actually have been calling out infrastructure and grid as a separate theme or as a macro theme for several years. It started under the Biden administration with many of the different bills that were passed there aimed at improving the grid, improving infrastructure, because we've got a lot of aging bridges and roads in the United States. And this ties into that as well. It's a shift in terms of who's funding it, because there's a lot of ending with the one big beautiful bill, there's a lot of shift out of some of the government funding of that. But the important theme is, and this is one thing we've been showing, when you look at charts of private sector spending, particularly on AI, on data centers, also on distribution facilities, that started during the pandemic. Shipping containers, leaning into the shipping industry. There's a lot of things based or aimed at rebuilding, if you will, the capabilities in the United States and hopefully in North America of rebuilding those capabilities to be able to be self-sufficient, particularly if we ever face another issue like the pandemic or heaven forbid, a war.